Welcome to the Groupthink Podcast, and in this special episode of the show, we're going to be having on one of my favorite smaller film critics on YouTube. His name is Oliver Buckley, and he hosts the YouTube channel Embrace the Film, and like I said, he is criminally undersubbed, and I appreciate him willing to come on the show. Hope you're having a good evening.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having me today.
Sure, I mean, I know you're out on the East Coast, so this is a little later for you, but I hope it's not going to be too bad. I mean,
not a problem.
So, tell us how you got your channel started. What's where do you come from on YouTube?
Well, honestly, I've been a filmmaker for many years, and YouTube is something I've always been interested in. It wasn't until about 2 years ago that I just up and decided it was time to finally get myself on there, and I've always been interested in discussing films and kind of exploring the meanings of films. So YouTube seemed like a really good place for me to be able to do that and just have a lot of fun doing it.
Sure, I can see why. I mean, I see the immense passion that goes into a lot of the channel. I mean, you've been posting consistently almost every single day, and I can tell there's a lot of work that goes into that. Like, do you have one that's going up like every day this month for Halloween?
Not every day this whole month. It was starting the 21st, leading up to Halloween. I'm doing every single one of the Halloween films, plus a few other random films in between.
I mean, sure. I mean, you've even beyond that, you had something going up a couple times a week, so you're keeping a really good cycle going in addition to everything else you got going.
I'm definitely trying.
I assume you like what is your specialty in film outside of this?
Well, if the channel is any indication, horror has always been my thing. I've made quite a few short films in the past, but nothing that I was ever particularly proud of. Basically, I've just been working up to breaking into features eventually, and the channel is a way to kind of help me hone my craft a little more.
Sure. So you're a writer-director generally when you work on your shorts?
Yes. Cool.
So, like you said, I know you're very much a horror guy for the majority of your content. So I thought this would be like when we were discussing. This is largely going to be kind of the our podcast's Halloween show, and we both kind of came into this with a series of horror films we just wanted to discuss. Since when this is launching, it'll probably be just a few days before Halloween itself. So if you haven't imbibed in the horror genre yet, or if you're just a couple days out from the holiday, this is a good chance to get a couple recommendations for that. So, where do you want to start in terms of the list of horror films we kind of went through?
Let's see. I guess a good one to start with, I think, that's kind of the furthest away from Halloween itself, would probably be Martin.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's certainly kind of it's out there. It's a very weird kind of horror movie. You said you hadn't actually watched this before, right?
I had seen it a long time ago, but it had been many years.
Yeah, I mean, I only started getting into George Romero a little after his passing, unfortunately, so I didn't catch this until recently. I remember I got introduced to this, I think, the way a lot of normie film buffs did, but via Red Letter Media, because they reviewed this on their channel right after he passed, and I wanted to track it down and it took me the longest time to actually find a copy of it, but I finally did, and I'm glad I did because I think it's my favorite Romero film I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is one that I can definitely say is one of his more underseen films. Like, I don't know many people who have seen it, and those who have don't remember it at all.
I mean, yeah, it's part of what makes it interesting to me is that I think it stands. I mean, I don't want to jump into The Exorcist right away, but I think that the movie is kind of a antithesis of that. I don't know if you saw that at all when you watched it, but
I guess I can see where you're coming from now that I think about it.
yeah, I mean, Martin's a very uncomfortable kind of movie to watch just because of what the actual content of the film is. I mean, in contrast with The Exorcist, which is kind of about just like how supernatural entities fit into the modern world, Martin is very much a story about a person who believes he's a supernatural entity but isn't one, and it just turns into this incredibly uncomfortable story of someone who thinks he's more important or more powerful than he is, just going around doing absolutely horrific things to innocent women.
Right, like, I actually kind of see this movie as more of a... It's kind of a character study. Like, I kind of look at it the way I look at both of the adaptations of Maniac. Like, it's a look into the mind of someone who's genuinely disturbed, and we kind of see things the way that he sees them.
I absolutely agree. I mean, it's a very somber story, and just the way it's described, and I like how it contrasts the world as it is with the world as he sees it, with all these shots that are just kind of clearly homages to the Universal monster movies that are just kind of supposed to be what his inner thoughts of the events around him that as he sees them in his mind, as opposed to what actually is happening, which is just absolutely horrific to watch.
Right, like the opening scene when he's breaking into the train car, and it cuts to that black and white, almost like it's like that idyllic movie moment for this brief second before you see what's actually going on.
Yeah, and this strangely older cousin, I can't, whose name escapes me. I think it's like Max. No, it's not Max Cady. I was just watching Cape Fear. It's it's something like Kada or something like that. It Kang Kodos. I'm really not remembering, but it's something very vague and Lithuanian. But
Yeah.
but he has the same kind of moments later in the movie too, where he's imagining himself essentially as Van Helsing. So it's not just Martin's character study; it's also him, because he's just as deluded essentially as Martin is, in a completely different way.
That's very true.
I'm trying to think of. Sorry, I had a brain fart just now.
That's all right.
And I think, and like I said, I don't tend to see it discussed with The Exorcist, mostly just because I don't think anyone actually discusses Martin as a film, because no one's seen it. But I thought, when I saw the movie, I thought, for some reason, I just thought the parallels were kind of obvious, especially the scene where the young George Romero himself shows up as the priest, and he starts making fun of the Exorcist. I'm like, this is a little on the nose, but but I mean, that might be a good way to just transition into The Exorcist, because it's like I said, I think it makes a good double feature, because The Exorcist is fundamentally a story about just pre-modern things awakening in a modern world where people don't really know how to handle them, and it's really just kind of mining this primordial terror in its audience.
Right. I actually almost feel like now that you bring up that parallel, it almost feels like Martin was Romero's way of saying, like, it's like his answer to The Exorcist, like saying that
Exactly, yeah.
that yeah, sure, these things are scary, but what's more terrifying is what what people like Martin deal with in their own minds.
Did it deal with in his own mind, and how the consequences of living that out can affect others too?
Correct.
Because his belief that he's a vampire doesn't just hurt him. It I don't want to say what happens to him in the end, but it doesn't help him. But it certainly the biggest victims of the film are the people around him, who are constantly suffering for what he is. And there are a lot of the most intense scenes of the films are just him trying to act out the role of the vampire, and just some of the practical effects in that are just incredibly gross and slimy, especially the way especially the way he cuts his victims with the knife.
Yeah, it's an absolutely disturbing film. Like, if you look at it in the right context.
Yeah, it really depends on how you watch it, though, because it's one of those things where the more you think about the consequences of it, the more unsettling it gets. But just on its own, it's just a very sad movie.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond, like, what I guess I'm kind of trying to gradually move over to The Exorcist, but what is your history on what is your history with that film?
With The Exorcist?
Yeah, I'd assume, given its status, you're probably slightly more aware of it.
Exorcist is one that I've seen quite a few times now. I honestly couldn't tell you when the first time I saw it was. I know I was very young. Probably shouldn't have seen it at that time. But, I think the funniest thing about The Exorcist for me now is, like, this is a film that was regarded, and it's still regarded to this day as, like, one of the scariest movies ever made. But now when you go back and watch it, it doesn't feel that way. Many of the more horrific moments of it feel funny. And, like, I don't know, like, that's kind of like I guess that's kind of a commentary on what we find acceptable these days as opposed to when it came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the interesting thing just regarding the conversation of that film is just watching how people who, as opposed to back then when you would have had half the audience who were just completely terrified of it. Like, nowadays, it's still a very effective film, but I definitely talk to more people that say The Exorcist isn't scary to me now than I do people that say The Exorcist is the scariest thing I've ever seen. Which is funny because, like, I think the Red Letter Media guys pointed out, like, every single horror film nowadays has it's as scary as The Exorcist on the box. But I mean, it's one of those things where I think watching it recently, my reflection on it was that it's a movie that's scary to someone who's probably a lot more sensitive to the content than someone is now. Like, nowadays we have the Conjuring movies, which are a little more tuned to the modern sensibility of what scares people, and they're essentially doing the same thing that The Exorcist is doing, but there's a lot more viscerality to them than The Exorcist. And I think that, well, maybe someone could be bored watching The Exorcist nowadays, considering how our younger generations doesn't really handle pacing all that well. But I could definitely see why people would just watch this and be like, where's the scary part? I didn't see the scary part in the scary movie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the more frightening aspects of The Exorcist are more in the subtext of it now than in the more in your face, like, possession elements.
Yeah, the implications are scarier than the actual content, which I think actually is in its favor, especially thematically.
Yeah, like, prime example, I guess, would be the, like, I don't know if they're intentional, but the themes of, like, sexual abuse that can be read from it now are, I feel like anybody who watches it now that may have experienced things similar to that could draw more something more horrific from the film than somebody like, say, me, who's just your average Joe, knows a little bit about movies.
Yeah, my thought. I mean, the sexual abuse is definitely one angle to hit it at. I mean, it's certain. My primary takeaway was more of the. It's like the classic rule of that what you can't see is scarier than what you can, and a lot of the movie's themes and its presentation of the demon is in the fact that you cannot see what it is and you don't know what it is, and for a long time the movie plays coy as to whether or not the girl's actually possessed, right up until the point where it's clear that she's possessed.
Right.
So,
it kind of feeds into that almost Lovecraftian fear of the unknown.
yeah, I mean, which is the story of the film too, which is the fear of something primordial that we don't understand arising in a world that doesn't know how to comprehend it. Which I think that's ultimately what makes the film interesting now, more so than scary, because I can't say I was scared watching it the last time I watched it. Which I don't know if that's a compliment to say, man, that's an interesting movie. But
I mean, for someone like me, that's definitely, like, I'd rather be more intrigued by a film than for it to attempt to scare me.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, I can certainly see why people still hold it up as a gold standard. Out of curiosity, did you ever see his follow-up documentary that he did last year? The director, William Friedkin?
Oh, that was, wasn't it like The Devil and something?
Father Amorth, yeah.
I haven't had a chance to see that yet.
I reviewed it. It is the most depressing thing I think I've ever seen in my life, which is saying a lot, but it would have been a much cooler documentary had they not added, like, really embarrassing, like, devil sounds to the scenes where you're supposedly watching someone undergoing an exorcism.
Oh, no.
It is so bizarre. I do not get what was going through his head when he was directing that, but I don't know. It's conceptually fascinating, but I cannot believe that Friedkin would dedicate years of his life to doing a documentary like that and then adding sound effects to functionally ruin it. It is just depressing. Did you ever watch the sequels to The Exorcist? I have not gotten around to this yet.
I have seen, let's see. I didn't see Exorcist 3. I've seen Exorcist 2, and I saw the two, like, prequels.
I've heard 3 is the really good sequel, but I've heard nothing but bad things about 2.
Yeah, 2 kind of went off the rails. Like, it didn't really feel anywhere near what the first one was.
Is that where they announced the demon's name is Pazuzu?
Yeah.
Which I can't think of that anymore without thinking of Farnsworth and Futurama screaming, Pazuzu! Darn it, Futurama's ruined another perfectly bad horror movie for me. But
oh, did you see the TV series? It was like 2 seasons.
No, but I have an interesting story. I actually worked at I briefly worked at a recording studio where they were doing ADR recording for that when the show was still in production. So
Really?
I briefly got to meet one of the actors, but I never actually watched the show. It's one of those things where it would have been much more cool at the time if I realized who the actor was, but I did see like 2 scenes of it having the dialogue recorded, so I probably should watch it. It sounds interesting.
I definitely recommend it. I don't want to tell you anything about it because, like, the surprise of it is better. But I don't know. It definitely, like, connects to the films, so it's like it's pretty cool.
Is this something where I should watch all 5 Exorcist films first for context and then watch it, or should I just watch the first movie and then watch it?
I think if you've seen at least the first one and, like, maybe any of the other ones, Like you definitely don't need to see all of them because I watched it just fine without having seen 3.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. It sounds really fascinating. Everything else. So
Yeah.
let's jump into one of your recommendations for the movie picks. What tell me about Trick or Treat and what made you wanted to do that one?
All right. Well, Trick or Treat honestly is one of my absolute favorite Halloween themed horror films. Uh, it's an anthology film. If you've never seen it, it's like it basically tells. I think it's 5 different stories, but that are all perfectly woven together into one continuous narrative, and it plays on all the themes of the holiday, like all your basic stuff like jack-o'-lanterns and witches and all that, but also creates some of its own, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought when you say that was the I don't want to say to anyone who hasn't seen it because it's a really good movie, but the transformation scene later in the movie where you think it's gonna go one way and it turns into like the opposite of it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I didn't expect it to go there, and there's a reversal on a reversal, but yeah, I mean, when I first heard it was a anthology, I was kind of imagining it was going to be something in the like of a creep show, which I wasn't, which I wasn't totally looking forward to. But then I watched it and I was like, oh, all the stories they're intermixed with one another. That's really fascinating. Like I wouldn't have thought to do a horror anthology like that. Although I have some functional questions about the continuity and what the actual like order of events is if all this is happening on the same night, but on its own it's really really good. I hadn't seen it until just preparing for this little marathon. I was aware of it because Michael Dougherty is he's kind of starting to get into the mainstream now that he's done Godzilla King of the Monsters, and he
Yeah.
did Krampus a couple years ago, which I think I've heard good things about, but I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen Krampus?
Yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out if you enjoyed creep creep show Trick or Treat.
Yeah, I just realized that Godzilla is his only movie so far that isn't holiday themed, and I'm kind of depressed about that now. But but yeah, I mean, Trick or Treat, it's absolutely. I was very impressed by it. There were a lot of really good actors and a lot of really effective like horror scenes that I wasn't expecting. Especially, I think the one that really stands out to me is the one towards the end with the older man and the little demon
Little
child thing.
Sam.
I don't want to say what it is because it's a really clever series of like back and forth between the character to the guy and the creature.
Yeah.
So I just absolutely adored that scene where the guy's just running around with a shotgun. And it's I don't want to explain it because this movie is absolutely needs to be watched. I mean, is this a movie you'd say is kind of underrated? I mean, I was aware of it tangentially, but I don't know anyone who's seen it offhand. So
Yeah, I definitely think that this is definitely one that deserves way more attention than it gets. Um, Personally, I feel like this is a movie that was made with so much love for this time of year, and like you can see it in absolutely every single frame. It is incredible how much detail they wove in, like from not only just the casual everyday decoration types of things like jack-o'-lanterns and all that, but like it even delves deep into like the origins of Halloween, and it's for somebody like me who absolutely loves this time of year, and like this is my Christmas. So uh this is the gold standard for the type of horror movie that I want to watch this month.
have you reviewed it yet on your channel?
I have not. I was going to review it this year, but unfortunately I did not have time, so it's gonna hold off.
Well, sure. I mean, do we want to get into your other pick, or do we want to save that for later since it's tangentially related to the holiday?
We can hold off on that one.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be our or one of our best discussions of everything I've seen so far. So, where does that leave us? Oh, so we got what do you want to talk? Alien or The Shining first?
Let's hit Alien.
Sure. So, I will say this for context. I would say that I'm more of a science fiction nerd than a horror nerd necessarily, just because that's always been my great love in cinema. Not that there's anything wrong with horror, just that I didn't get into it until much later in my life. But Alien and its sequels are probably the first major horror franchise I actually got into, and I'm glad I finally was able to see it on an actual movie screen just a couple weeks ago, because it's apparently the 40th anniversary within just a couple weeks ago, and it improved. And I'd seen the movie about a half dozen times up until now, but it absolutely is one of the best things I've ever seen once you've seen it on an actual theatrical screen, because suddenly every single detail in the film just opens up and you can just focus on the moments of it, because there's so much that's just buried in the movie that you don't realize if you're watching it casually.
I'm extremely jealous of you right now because that is one I've yet to see on the big screen.
I'm sure if it'll probably get another revival screen. I mean, do you get revival screenings out where you live?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I see it all the time out here. But it's always like it was always at odd times. Like, you want to go see Alien at midnight on a Wednesday? I'm like, well, not really, but kind of. But it was one of the. I'm glad I finally did it after like waiting 5 years of just trying to figure out a time when it would actually work with me. But I mean, yeah, it's arguably that between that and John Carpenter's The Thing, those are my two favorite horror films of all time. I'm. When did you watch it for the first time?
Oh, let's see. Alien was definitely a very early one for me. That I think that was one of the first horror franchises I've seen. I know the absolute first full one was Evil Dead.
Oh wow! How young out of context? How young were you when all this happened?
Well, let's see. My first horror film ever was Child's Play when I was about 3.
Even the title's appropriate. Oh my gosh! So you're just inculcated in this genre with, like, they just weren't paying attention when you were watching these movies, were you? Were they your parents?
Well, I was lucky enough to grow up with parents, grandparents, and extended family who all love these types of films, and I guess wanted to get me ingrained into them early.
Oh my gosh, that would have been like, that would have never happened in my household. Like, I wasn't allowed. I remember as a kid, my favorite movie was Blues Brothers, and I was never allowed to watch it on DVD because there was too much swearing on it, so I had to watch it on cable. Every other year when they ran it on cable, I would watch the tail end of Blues Brothers. I didn't see the whole thing till I was like in high school. So just hearing that for me is just like, oh lordy, lordy. but yeah. So you said you watched this when you were younger, and did you watch all the sequels immediately too, or was that something you waited off on?
Oh no, let's see. I watched the first Alien, and then I think it was almost immediately after I was shown Alien 2, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection.
Oh man, and I'm such a shill for this franchise. I think I like every single Alien film, although I am a bad student of this because I haven't seen the Versus Predator films yet. But
you're better off.
Yeah, that's kind of what I imagined. I remember a couple of years ago on Black Friday, I bought a DVD double feature of them, and it's just been sitting in my to watch stack in my room for about like 5 years, and I'm not in any rush. So maybe one day I'll let that happen, but I don't know. I even like the ones in that franchise that are considered the bad ones. Like I remember, I think I only watched Resurrection once, but I liked it. Maybe just because it's a Joss Whedon script, but
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, I'm kind of the same way. I don't know many people who like Alien 3 or Alien Resurrection, but I still like them for what they are.
Well,
obviously, they're not the first or second film, but
the people that like 3 really like 3. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
there are some people that are just like Alien 3 is the best one. I'm like, really? But I mean, I get it. It's a cool freaking movie, but
I mean, I think I would definitely like it more than I do if it had come out the way Fincher wanted it to be.
what was his original pitch on that? I've heard tangentially. I think Chris Stuckman did a whole video on this, but
Yeah, he had a whole. I couldn't tell you it verbatim, but I know it was like it went into so much detail regarding the planet that they're on and what that planet has experienced in terms of like almost like a famine, like you know how they get like deloused and everything in the movie.
yeah.
Well, like it goes so much further into detail on why that is, why the planet is so like desolated, and it it's kind of insane. Like if you watch the behind the scenes on that one, it's like they talk for like over an hour on what it was supposed to be.
I know there was like 4 separate versions of the movie that they had pitched at different points that had different. Like at one point it was going to be set on Earth. At one point they had a completely different version that Fincher had in mind, and they re-edited it like several times, and they cut out a lot of his vision. But I'll have to rewatch the Stuckman video on that, because I know he goes in depth with that with, I think it was John Flick, but
Yeah,
yeah,
he's usually pretty good about that.
yeah, we're off track on the first Alien movie, but when I'm trying to think of the best place to start with it, because it's a movie that it's just so tightly written, but I'm just like having trouble figuring out what the best angle to hit it is. Because production design is perfect. I mean,
Yeah, that is like just that blend of like human mechanical and organic, like living organic atmosphere. Like I don't know, it's incredible.
yeah,
Giger is a genius.
oh gosh, I mean, just the way he melds it in. I mean, I was when I was seeing it on the screen, like, it was amazing just how much the alien like melds into the background when it's in the shots. So it's clearly something that's organic-ish, but it's such a fake. Not fake looking, isn't like it doesn't look real, but like it's such an artificial looking creature at times that when it's standing perfectly still, you wouldn't know what it is, and that gets you several times in the actual movie.
Yeah, like it exists as like this like biomechanical thing that like it can hide so perfectly within like in the ending sequence, and when it's like in the wall and you don't even notice it.
Oh man, that's like the best jump in the entire movie, and it's one you do not expect that point. Do you like the way that again, I'm going into the sequels, which I know I shouldn't be right now, but do you like the way that the creature they evolve the mobility of the creature in the sequels?
Yeah, I do, only because like now when I watch the original, the original is my absolute favorite one, despite any flaws that I have with it. But like when I watch the original now, there are a lot of sequences where like it'll cut over to the alien and it's like very robotic. Like he doesn't move very quickly or anything like that. And
Yeah.
I feel like once Cameron got a hold of it, he quickened the pace of the creatures, and everything felt much more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the only problems with the sequels, is that they kind of like kill a lot of the mystique of that first film, where a lot of the first film feels like it could be more intentional. Like the way they make the xenomorph move, especially in like Covenant, where it's just this incredibly fast mobile thing that can climb anywhere and jump anywhere and get through any surface. Like it makes the first film feel like the mobility of the creature is a flaw, which it isn't in that film, and I think that makes it makes the whole franchise feel like not cohesive.
Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, I mentioned The Thing earlier, but I think I like that movie. I've grown to like that movie slightly more than Alien, just because that movie hasn't had so much baggage from multiple sequels that like change the context of what the creature is.
I can definitely agree. I mean, I don't want to go completely off topic. Like, The Thing is one of my top 5 of all time, so that's...
We could add a section on The Thing if we want. It's alright, it's my show, darn it. I didn't watch it in the lead up to this, but now I want to. What were you going to say on it, or?
No, I honestly didn't really have anything with
That's
The
fair.
Thing. I was trying not to diverge.
That's fair. I mean, at some point I want to do a full discussion on The Thing, just because I love the crap out of that movie, but that can wait. I mean, we still have what else is there to say on Alien? I mean, if you haven't seen Alien yet, please watch it, because I don't want to spoil it. I mean, it's one of those movies where almost everything that people like about the movie ends up in the culture, so it's hard to go into it not expecting those scenes, like the burst scene and stuff like that. And I don't know about the ending and if that's considered iconic or not, but
I don't think I would say the ending of the first film is iconic. I think that they like Aliens is what far more iconic ending.
Yeah, I mean, Alien seems to have the more audience appeal of anything in the entire series, because I noticed that people like Alien is the one that people tend to jump at critically, while Aliens is the one everyone seems to like just completely go nuts over.
Well, I mean, you shift from horror to fast-paced action.
Well, yeah, it's kind of horror action hybrid, and it's also a much more cathartic watch than Alien, which I think that tends to appeal to audiences a lot more who want the more traditional resolution, which Alien really doesn't have. It's a pretty dour ending by the end of it.
Right.
I mean, you see all the stuff people complain about nowadays of critics versus like the audiences. I mean, like that's a pretty good comparison of that right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people.
I don't know. Like, I won't argue that Aliens is probably one of the 2 greatest sequels of all time, but I don't know. There's something inherently terrifying about the first movie. Like, for me, there are 2 things in the entire world that scare me beyond belief, and that's when I think about what exists at the depths of the ocean and what could possibly exist in the vastness of the cosmos. And Alien plays on that fear of what you could encounter out there, and how you would have no possible way of dealing with that in any real way.
I mean, that's exactly true. I agree with that totally. My only issue with Aliens from a cold critical perspective is just that it kind of it might I don't necessarily agree with the statement, but I've heard a lot of people who really don't like Aliens that say that it devalues that concept slightly, just by explaining too much about what the alien is.
See, I actually don't. I don't think that. Like, I think it actually enhances it. Because, yeah, sure, you learn a little more about it, so it's not as mysterious, but you actually learn how it functions, and, like, now you know that something like that is out there. If something that horrific is out there, this hive mind of insect-like creatures that essentially adapt to whatever host they take on, then what out there could be worse than that?
Fair enough. I can see the point there. I would only say that I don't like the fact that they're constantly retconning the creature and the lore of the series regularly in their movies.
Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, I like Covenant. I think it's a fun movie, but that's like the one thing I can't stand about it is the fact that they go miles out of their way to explain what the actual creature is. And like everything I like about that movie is the stuff that doesn't actually have to do with the xenomorph itself.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I loved Prometheus for what it was, and I feel like Covenant. It should have. I feel like they're trying too hard to eventually connect it, and it's just like not. It's just not meshing well.
Yeah, there's a lot I appreciate in it. I mean, obviously, I think it's going to take a while, and I think they're going to make that third one eventually with Ridley Scott, and it's going to probably be the one that ties it in with the very beginning of the first Alien movie, which they haven't said, but I kind of see that. I imagine that's where they're going with it, but
That'd probably be the smart approach.
yeah, I mean, we kind of know vaguely where this has to end and where that movie begins, so it's you can kind of draw the line there of ship full of xenomorphs goes out into deep space, and then an engineer winds up with a whole bunch of eggs on his ship. You could probably draw a line between those two things, but it's like I said, I like this entire series, but I don't. But the fear of the unknown needs to stay the center of it, and the more they continually retcon the alien's abilities and where its origin is, the more I think it alienates a lot of people. Because there are a lot of people that hate Covenant. I mean, there was a lot more people that hate Prometheus, which I don't. I think it's a beautiful movie. I think I enjoy watching it, but I can definitely see why people get agitated at it.
Well, I don't know. Like I liked Prometheus. I think more than Covenant because it didn't feel as connected. So it was like it was almost its own thing.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Although my brain is kind of mad at it now that they didn't call it Alien Prometheus, because now my Blu-ray library looks really lumpy and awkward. I'm like, why is there this weird thing that's not related to Alien that's sitting right next to Alien? But that's a pet peeve. I shouldn't be complaining about it. But, I mean, yeah, I appreciate that it's that's its own thing, and that it doesn't necessarily put any sort of serious binds on it. I mean, honestly, Prometheus isn't the one that does the retconning, because it still leaves what the xenomorph is pretty vague, other than saying it's the descendant of a super weapon created by the engineers, which that's pretty vague, because in that movie you don't really find out what the goo does.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. Like things that bother me the most, I think, are like, so like in Prometheus, you see like the wall effigy that's very clearly a xenomorph, but then you find out in Covenant that David engineered the xenomorphs, so how could there be an effigy in Prometheus? I don't know, it's like they're kind of contradicting themselves.
I would assume this is Ridley Scott not paying attention more than anything else. It's like, oh, this production designer created this amazing mural of a xenomorph. Yeah, put it in the background. Wait, it doesn't actually make sense. The xenomorph doesn't come out until the second movie. Yeah, whatever.
It doesn't matter.
I think they're written by different people, too, so they probably didn't pay that much attention.
That's true.
But yeah, we went off the track of. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole series is fun to talk about in conjunction, so I think that's a fair discussion one way or the other. But yeah, if you haven't seen the Alien movies, definitely watch the first one. Definitely watch Aliens. If you're not sure where to go from there, you can stop, but you're welcome to join on the crazy train too. Which speaking of the crazy train, Shining.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Have you seen Room 237, the documentary about it?
Yes, I have.
I was just watching it in the background at work today, just because I wanted to brush up a little after when watching the movie again, and I've been thinking about it a lot today, and just reflecting on how complicated it is as a movie, where it might actually be one of the greatest films ever made in the history of cinema, but I can't tell you what it's actually about. it,
Uh,
it is so impenetrable.
I mean, I don't even know where to start.
I mean, it's coming into focus a little more now that I'm thinking about it with fresh eyes. Where it's clearly about like the perpetuation of violence and perpetuation of systems and things like that. Where it's about how something corrupts you and how you can escape that corruption, and how people who are the victims of it can escape it. But it doesn't really make what the central metaphor is clear within the text, and especially if you've seen that documentary, you know that metaphor can apply to a lot of things, up to and including the genocide of Native Americans and the moon landing being faked and shot by Stanley Kubrick. So it could mean a lot of things, because people tend to misconstrue Stanley Kubrick was a genius with Stanley Kubrick was a pedantic jerk who just made every single detail in his films exactly perfect to make exact meaning at all times, which means when Danny stands up, it's a metaphor for the Apollo 11 launch. You see why this is infuriating? I mean, it's an amazing movie, but then the crazies get a hold of it. And
I can't say I agree with half the stuff in that documentary.
Well, I love the documentary because it's just watching just crazy people spin yarns. It's wonderful. Like I know YMS did a review on it, and he's like, I can't stand this documentary. It's nothing but crazy people. And I'm like, I know, it's great. I mean, but it doesn't help in the analysis at all when trying to understand what it's actually about, and especially when you realize it's a completely different thing than Stephen King's vision for the book. It takes on its own life, and it takes on its own meaning, and it's such a minefield. We're just trying to dig into what it's all about.
Which, actually, you know what? This is a good time for me to break this kernel of knowledge out, since I haven't reviewed this film yet. It's one I've been putting off because I have a lot to say about it.
Oh, man.
But this, one of my favorite things about this film is the fact that so many people can interpret it in so many different ways. And like for me, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I always have been. But this is one of the only instances in really any example of adaptations where I actually enjoy Kubrick's vision for The Shining more than Stephen King's. Which I know many people out there are probably gonna hate me and disavow my channel now because of me saying that. But Stephen King's version of The Shining is very heavily rooted in the supernatural. There's no mystery to that. But Kubrick took this film and, like, he morphed it into this heavily psychological narrative that every step of the way you have no idea what is real or what is in these characters' heads. There are a few instances later in the film, like with Shelley Duvall, like seeing the skeletons and stuff that can't exactly be explained, but I think that even that can be interpreted as psychological on her part, given what she's experienced.
I don't want just to interject real quick. I've heard it said that the only moment in the movie that cannot be written off as not supernatural is when he gets unlocked from the freezer. Like, everything else you can assume is either a hallucination or in their heads, but that's like the only moment in the movie where you could say, oh, that could not have possibly happened without something supernatural happening.
Yeah, that's one I really can't explain. I have heard theories that some people think that Danny is the one who lets him out. We just never see it. I don't entirely agree with that, but I suppose it is possible.
I mean, yeah, it could be. I mean, well, I'm curious, how does the have you read the book version of Doctor Sleep? That because obviously part of the reason I want to talk about this is because that's coming out in a couple weeks. Like,
Right.
have you read the book version of it?
I have not, mostly because of how much I love the Shining movie, and I don't like the book so much, so I just kind of avoided reading that one, and I just didn't want to, like, taint the franchise for me, or
That's
the
fair.
idea for me.
I mean, I'm curious how much the movie. We'll just talk about that. I'm curious how much that when this movie comes out in a couple weeks, how much it's going to ultimately frame the events of that movie as literal or not, which is one of my only real concerns with it. Other than the fact that I'm not sure what the movie can actually do to address the labyrinth of themes from the movie, but it's one of those things where I think it has the opportunity to be a very interesting like extension of the of the movie's themes, but I'm also not sure how it could possibly do that.
Yeah, I'm honestly extremely curious about Doctor Sleep. Uh, I've seen the trailer, obviously, and the fact that they're making this film as a sequel to Kubrick's film is very strange to me, mostly because of Kubrick made it so psychological. But I know for a fact that Doctor Sleep, like the book, has a lot to do with like these weird vampiric creatures that like drain life force, which you see in the trailers. So I'm not sure. Like they're definitely steering it towards the supernatural. There's no way they can't.
Yeah, that's disconcerting, at least superficially, not having seen it yet. I have faith in it, given that they bumped it up from a January release to a November, which that seems to suggest that they have some faith that this can compete in award season, or at least next to award season movies, which is a pretty good sign overall that they have faith in it. And I know Mike Flanagan's supposed to be a really good director too.
Oh my god, like he is incredible. I've seen like everything he's done so far, and he's like the one reason I absolutely have faith that this is going to be at least good in its own right.
I feel like I should try to watch one or two of his movies before seeing Doctor Sleep, but I don't think I'll have time to watch House on the Haunted Hill. Although I have heard very good things about that too.
It's incredible.
Oh man, and they're all book adaptations, interestingly enough. So I guess he's
He has one on Netflix called Hush that it's just a short like hour and a half movie. I would definitely check it out.
okay. I'll look into these because I need to start doing a little more research for a bunch of stuff that's coming out this month. So my movie stack's going to be crazy for a couple weeks. But going back to the original Shining, I find it fascinating that this is such a accessible film by most regards, considering how out there it is. Like, if and most people who don't, I find most people really have a hard time getting into Kubrick, given how kind of out there he is most of the time. But this seems to be one I think almost anyone can watch and not really have a hard time understanding, which I think which I appreciate tremendously, especially just getting is like someone who's watched it for the first time back in college, who's getting into it for the first time.
Right, I can agree with that. I definitely, I feel like this one is like The Shining is something that people can they can understand on a surface level if they say watch it for the first time and never again. However, I feel that most people, it's not so much what it's about that people get drawn to. It's more like the feelings that it gives you, like between the way it's shot with that the slow zooms and slow dollies, and like the way the score just drones on, and it kind of like, whether you want to or not, you get pulled into this atmosphere and into these characters' heads.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, I was watching it the other day. Like, the only criticism I could possibly lay out of this film was that there's no escalation to the way the way that's laid out. Like even from the first moments you see Jack Nicholson, the guy looks freaking insane. Like, just so you know, like he's got that vibe to him where he's just like, yeah, this is some random guy in the street, but this guy could definitely commit an axe murder, and I would not be surprised. Like, even when he's like chill, it's he's still unnerving.
Yeah, the whole film almost feels like a ticking time bomb. Like you're just waiting for the moment when he finally flies off the handle.
Yeah, it's like watching someone you know is like this person is a danger to themselves. They're gonna do something bad eventually, and it's like, oh, it's not gonna. This isn't going good. It's just going exactly where you think it's going. But I mean, it definitely. I think I appreciate the atmosphere that, given just how much it hits you from those opening moments, and it just keeps it up like the entire way through. It is a. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a super scary film. Like, I know some people find it very enthralling, but having seen it a half dozen times now, I'm not super like scared of it anymore necessarily.
I like. I'm definitely not afraid of it anymore, but I can definitely say that, like, even still, I've seen this movie hundreds and hundreds of times at this point, and it's literally one that no matter how many times I watch it, every single time I get completely immersed in it, and I can't keep my eyes off the screen. Like, it's that captivating to me. I don't know what it is about it.
Well, like, yeah, it's like I said, there's a vagueness to the film that's almost frustrating because you're watching it and it's completely enthralling from beginning to end, and then you get to the end and it's like, what even happened in that movie? It's like, what literally happened? Who are these? What does it mean? It's not like it's devoid of meaning because it's so purposeful, and it's so clear that Kubrick had something very meditative to say in the movie. And you get this, and there's always the stories that everyone talks about where he made the actress, whose name I'm forgetting, she made him do that one take like 100 times until she had an emotional breakdown.
Oh man,
good grief! It's one of the, it's like you can tell there's a clear meaning behind it, and I think part of what makes it so fascinating is just trying to figure out what it is. Like, I'm watching it again. You notice more and more details to it. Like, I remember this time I watched it, watching the famous "Come Play with Us" scene, and I started to put more thought into the fact that that scene doesn't just end when he sees them. He has a moment afterward, and it's this great little moment where he's like, they're not real, they're not there, there's some sort of vision or memory, but they're not physically real. And it's this fascinating little moment of character growth I never really like internalized until just this watch through.
Yeah, I feel like even the scene, like, my favorite scene in almost any movie is the bat scene when she's swinging the bat at him and they're walking up the stairs. That sequence is literally like, I can't help but like feel how Shelley Duvall feels in that moment. Like, she portrays that so well, probably because she was put under so much stress, but you can see her character just like emotionally breaking down as he's following her and taunting her.
Oh man, now I want to watch it again. I mean, there's just so much you can talk about with it. It's an incredible deep dive, but I mean, maybe we should cut that conversation there because we have at least one more film we need to talk about before we wrap up tonight.
That's true.
So this was a complete blind jump for me, having seen this movie that you recommended we should watch. I did not quite get why it was one you wanted to talk to. So I rewatched the first Halloween movie, which I of course seen. I love John Carpenter. I've seen the majority of his films. I watched the second one for the first time because I wanted to kind of watch them numerically. And then I watched Halloween 3, Season of the Witch for the first time. Holy crap! How does everyone not love this freaking movie? Like, I just watched your review on it today, and you said, it's like, this is the black sheep. I'm like, how is this the freaking black sheep of this franchise? This is the most out there movie.
Well, I mean, this one definitely... It came out in a time where everybody just wanted more Michael Myers, and because it didn't have Michael Myers and it had nothing to do with the other movies, people just immediately shunned it, and nobody wanted to hear it.
I could definitely see that. I mean, I can understand in hindsight how someone would be like, "Where's Michael Myers? I want Michael Myers," but now we have 9 Michael Myers movies, so there's no shortage. We'll never run out of Michael Myers movies now, and they're gonna make it like I think they're making like 2 more now. So
yeah,
we will never run out of Michael Myers. But holy crap, I kind of wish this wasn't called Halloween, because then it would just be its own different thing. But
I've actually noticed recently that IMDb has relabeled it. It is now just Season of the Witch on there.
Isn't there like another really bad horror movie called Season of the Witch that came out like 2010-ish or something like that?
Yes. There's one in 2010, and then there was another one, I forget what year it was, but it was actually made by Romero.
Oh, wow. I mean, was the 2010 one a remake of the Romero one, or was it just the same name?
Same name. I don't think they had anything to do with each other.
Alright, fair enough. But, I mean, wow. I mean, them changing the name of Halloween 3, that's kind of big, but...
I don't think they ever officially did it, but I think a lot of people just call it Season of the Witch now.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's such a different movie, but I find the artistic intent behind it fascinating, where Carpenter's like, oh, we've done 2 Michael Myers movies. Maybe we get enough of that, and maybe we can make this more experimental and just branch the franchise out and to do something completely different. And wow, he went about as far differently as you possibly can. But
well, that's the thing. Like his initial idea was never to do Halloween 2. Like, he always wanted, if there were gonna be more Halloween movies, to just make different stories that all based around the themes of Halloween. So, like, this was his attempt to course correct, and nobody wanted it.
Well, there you go. Everyone knows what they want, but I mean, what? Sorry, I got distracted by my phone going off. But so what? When did you What's your? Well, you said that. What made you want to specifically talk about this one then?
Well, personally, like, for me, this is Halloween 3 is one of, like Trick or Treat, it's one of the most Halloween themed horror movies I've ever seen. Like, it actually deals more heavily than Halloween does. It actually deals with a lot of the themes of Halloween. It tries to integrate that into the plot. Like, obviously through witchcraft and, like, the use of these Halloween masks. But there aren't like, up until recently at least, there are a few indie films that try and do more Halloween themed things, but for a long time there were none. Like, nobody ever wanted to touch it, and I never understood why. And this film dared to do it when nobody else wanted to. Like, even if you look at the original Halloween, outside of some jack-o'-lanterns, there aren't even really any decorations anywhere in the movie.
That's true. I mean, obviously I'm hitting this from the perspective of having just watched it for the first time a couple days ago, but I mean, it's such a fascinating, different thing. Like, I really wish, like I really wish the movie wasn't called Halloween because it creates all these expectations of what you should go into it with. But it's the best John Carpenter movie that John Carpenter never actually directed, and although it definitely feels different than most of his movies insofar as I don't know if it almost comes off as like kind of spoofing off of like the anti-Halloween sentiments almost, like where people were like, oh no, they're gonna put like razors in your candy apples or something like that. It kind of has that feeling. It's like, oh no, if you kids celebrate Halloween, they're gonna be turned into a Celtic witch sacrificial ceremony where, and all of them will die at the same time. It's so out there, but I don't want to say it's like anti-Halloween or anything like that because I think the movie is so celebratory of it. But
well, I think that's actually cool because it makes it takes that old like you said, the razor blades and the candy kind of aesthetic, and it applies that to its villain, so that it almost makes, by extension, like Tom Atkins' character on the side of Halloween and trying to defend it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's definitely much more celebratory of it than not. I mean, but at the same time, I'm like, it definitely. I'm not entirely certain it does it from a storytelling level if it avoids the whole like Dungeons and Dragons satanic 80s paranoia stuff all that well, given that was just completely rampant at the time. But that would be my only complaint about it, just is that I don't think that the story is as celebratory as the content. I mean, who was the director on this?
This one was Tommy Lee Wallace, I believe. Same guy who did Stephen King's It.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting combination I wouldn't have expected. I know you like that a lot too. But,
oh yes.
I mean, I know a lot of the Halloween sequels were mostly done by like not no-name directors, but certainly like more grindhousey names, as opposed to Carpenter himself, who only did like the first one. But this definitely it has his fingerprints all over it, even though he didn't directly direct it.
Oh yeah, I mean I know he was involved with this one. I think as a producer, I think he had his hand in the writing and possibly in the scoring.
I would be shocked if he didn't score it, just based on how he does his scoring style. Because I mean, I think his deal was that he did mostly riffing, right? Like he mostly just kind of riffed on a basic score for most of his films.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not super comprehensive, so it would be weird to me if this was just some guy imitating Carpenter. I'm like, if you're imitating, you're very good at it. But I mean, for some reason, Did you ever see The Guest, the recent horror-ish movie?
Yeah, from I'm blanking on his name right
Adam
now.
Wingard.
Adam Wingard. Yep.
I know that movie's apparently. I saw Red Letter Media's interview with the guy who did the screenwriting for that. Apparently, that movie was very heavily inspired by Halloween 3, and I was just watching that the other night, so that was on my mind. That movie has a ton of Halloween just settings to it too.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because that one's like, it's set like, I forget what state, but it's like in the Midwest. Like so, aside from actual decorations, it doesn't seem like it's set on Halloween.
I think it's like New Mexico, Arizona, and like the Southwest.
Yeah,
because it's you get the dour like landscapes with all this like Halloween stuff on top of it.
Right.
Anyway, I'm off topic again, but yeah, I mean, I now want to watch every single Halloween movie based off of how much I liked 2 and 3. I mean, I just never got it. I don't up until now. The only sequel I'd watched was the one that came out last year, which I didn't hate. It's fun, but it definitely doesn't really work as a direct sequel to the first Halloween because that first one is such a stripped down movie, and This one seems to be kind of spoofing off the fact that it's the Michael Myers you see in the sequels, where he just turns into killing machine that can't be stopped. Which it's also not a particularly well written movie. Did you like it?
The newest one?
Yeah, from last year.
Yes. For the most part. There were a few things that I wasn't all that thrilled on, but I don't know, I wish they hadn't disregarded Halloween 2, but, I mean, based on Halloween 2's ending, I can see why.
You could have been arrested after that.
Yeah, I guess.
He's just immortal, so...
I don't know, I definitely think with this newer one, they did tame him back from some of the stuff he does in the other sequels. Like, he's much closer to Halloween 1 and 2 Michael Myers than any of the others.
So they get more extreme as they go along? Oh, wow.
Oh, God. Some of those sequels they get absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, man. And I know they don't ever go to Jason X levels, but...
Oh, no. Thank God.
Oh, man. Now I'm excited. Although I do have a quick story on the new Halloween movie I thought I'd share. Shout out to my regular friend Steve, who's been on the show a couple times. But I went and saw it with him opening night because we were gonna review it together, and he brought in an entire case of beer. Somehow managed to sneak it into a movie theater. I don't know how. He drank most of it, and I should add as a context, he is an absolutely enormous Halloween fan. He has all the movies. He loves it. By about halfway through the movie, he keeps leaning over to me and just keeps screaming, "Freaking boomers, man!" And just kept complaining about how the characters are just they're invincible and stuff like that. And he's just towards the end, I kept having to lean over and tell him to be quiet because he was just like, "Freaking boomers!" And I thought he was gonna start throwing cans at the screen, but. Honestly, watching him do that might have been better than the movie itself. But yeah, I will say, no matter what else can be said, I now want to watch every single movie in this franchise, even the ones I don't know which ones are considered the bad ones. Although I do want to see them all now, just for context.
I definitely think if you're gonna go through Halloween, you might as well hit all of them regardless, even the worst ones.
Oh, man.
I can tell you Resurrection is probably your low point of the whole series.
Do you like the Rob Zombie ones?
For what they are. I kind of treat those as their own thing. Like, yeah, it's retelling the story, but it takes it in a completely different direction.
That's kind of what I heard. I know a lot of people don't particularly like that version of it, but I kind of assumed it was just kind of a completely divergent, vision for that story. So
yeah.
Plus at this point, there's no shortage of Halloween. So like I said, if you're not happy with one, there's 8 others you can satiate your bloodlust with. So
it's very true.
Anyway, we're kind of hitting the time where I usually cut off, and we're both. I'm sure it's a lot later where he is right now than where I am. So, can you do you want to give us a quick shout out to all your stuff, and then we'll call it a night?
All right. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, just tell us about your channel and your shout out your social media, and say if there's anything else we should definitely check out.
All right. Well, I mean, if any of you out there are interested in horror films the way I am, the way we are, I would definitely love to have you check out Embrace the Film. You can find the channel. It's youtube.com/embracethefilm. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find me just by looking up Embrace the Film on any of them. Yeah.
I will say, I'll send you a screenshot. The other day I looked up your channel, and for some reason, yours was the second result. The first result was a documentary called Embrace, which was apparently about nudists.
Yep.
You noticed that too?
Yep. I've been contending with that since the beginning.
Oh gosh. I mean, there are worse things, but I saw that and I was like, I should probably send this to him. He should probably know about this. But I'm glad you're aware of this problem as it is. So, but yeah, I definitely recommend him. He runs a criminally undersubbed channel. But so thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'd be happy to come back if you ever want.
Oh sure. Well, we should plan something for another holiday weekend binge watch movies on. Probably not Thanksgiving because I think there's only 2 Thanksgiving movies. But but yeah, have a good night and have a happy Halloween, everyone.